Time to turn our attention to the weekend's hurling. Delighted to welcome James Skehill back to the show. James, how are you getting on?
Good now, and how are things with you?
Yeah, good. So, semi-final weekend, like the last couple of years, ever since they've changed the format and put them on the same weekend, they have almost always delivered. They've always been brilliant games. We'll start with Limerick against Waterford this Saturday at 5 o'clock in Croke Park, obviously. We always try and clutch at straws, James, when it comes to any slight weakness that we might be able to find in this Limerick side. Waterford, they may be knackered after the last few weeks, but is there a world in which they manage to get that early lead and hold on to it, or are Limerick just way too accustomed to actually trailing by a few points in the early exchanges?
No, I think Waterford are in a great position. I myself have doubted them 2 weeks in a row, so I'm not going to call this game too closely. But they've got to the front, so they hit the front early from against Galway, and they kept the lead for an awful lot for the whole course of the game. Barring a 5-minute period against Tipperary, they did the same. Waterford came out with the traps fast. They scored 5 of the first 6 points. Hit for a couple of sucker punch goals in 60 seconds, but clawed their way back into it and got the lead after the water break in the first half and maintained that lead. I think Waterford are going to have to bring massive energy in definitely the first quarter anyway, and try to get ahead as best they can. Because what you don't want is for Limerick to just, I suppose, stay in the fight too soon when you kind of throw your best punch, if you know what I mean. But Waterford have a great thing going for them on that they're extremely efficient. So what I mean with that is, like, if you consider the second half against Tipperary, where Tipp had 9 wides, and kind of sucked the life out of themselves a small bit. Waterford only had 1 wide, and that was the wide that Bennett took on the sideline near the end. So their shooting is fantastic, and they're getting shooting from all over the pitch. So their half-back line is scoring, their midfield is scoring. They have a broad range of scorers, so they're not over-dependent on 1 or 2 guys to do the damage for them. So I think if Waterford come out early, set themselves into the game as soon as they can, and just be efficient in their shooting, they're in for a great shout.
And are you noticing them taking on safer shots at all by any stretch of the imagination, James, or is it literally just accuracy and the basic skill set that Waterford have seems to be far improved than we expect?
A safe shot to me would be inside 50 yards, but that'd be classed as a safe shot, where I think they have more time. So what they call that safe or not, I'm not sure. I just think that what they do is they're getting themselves in really good positions through support runners.
Right.
So when you see attacks, there's 3 or 4 guys on the attack together, and next thing there's the ball popped into space, and that person has good time to shoot, which then results in efficient shooting. So if you get, if you're within inside, realistically speaking, nowadays 70, 80 yards, and you have a couple of seconds, 3 seconds really to set a shot, you should be scoring. You know what I mean? It's when you go beyond that distance and go further that the shots tend to waver. So I just think they're extremely efficient, and they've got great shooters all over the pitch who are on their good sides. So, for example, Callum Lyons on the 5 side, he seems to be a really strong right-sided player. And how often have we seen him come down that channel and popping over pints like there's no one on him, So, and again, they're creating great opportunities at great times, and they're getting guys up on the ball. We'd have often spoke about Leeson, even back, if you go back to the Waterford Galway League game a long time ago, where he was placed at number 6 and it didn't suit him. And what they've done as well is they put Bennett into number 6. And when you plug one hole, it nearly plugs a few holes for you, if you get me. So what has happened is Bennett's gone into 6. He settled up the half back line. Now Gleeson can show forward to his probably his best position, whereas by kind of call it a free roaming forward. So that appointment, if you like, to Bennett at 6 has worked really well in Waterford's favour, because it's resulted in Ozzie Gleeson being up the front for them as well.
That free roaming forward then, James, does Limerick have a template for that sort of player, if it's a talismanic player who does have a free roll up front?
Yeah, see, Limerick traditionally wouldn't, normally if you're 9/10 of teams, let's say, would play Waterford and say, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to man-mark Jimmy Byrne and we need to man-mark Austin Gleeson. I actually don't think Limerick care about who they play. I think they have their set defensive system. They play predominantly zone and play with their 2 wing backs you generally don't see Kyle Hayes in the 5 wing. You don't see Jimmy Burns in the 7 wing. You don't see Jimmy Burns number 6. So they play predominantly zone. So I honestly don't think they give a hoot of who's coming near them. If I was to do a matchup, you'd be saying that Jimmy Burns would be best suited to Mark and Ozzie Gleeson, because then it won't take away from the Kyle Hayes attacking. And also, I don't think Liam Cahill would actually would like to see Ozzie having to mark Kyle Hayes, because then Ozzie would have to turn into a defender, and the last thing you want Ozzie Gleeson doing is going back towards his own goal. So I think what you'll see is a Limerick setup on the weekend, whereby they play zone I think someone will pick up Ozzy when he comes into certain areas and channels, and they'll just try to do what they always do, which is completely crowd out that middle third area and create a war zone as such. And then just when he gets the ball, limit his time entirely, because he's going to pop up in the half forward line. He's going to pop up in the full forward line. I think when he comes into those positions, you'll see maybe a Jimmy Burns, a Sean Finn, Will O'Donoghue pick him up just for intermittently, say. And Limerick are so well drilled that they can hand over players and they can interchange. It's hard to explain over Zoom, but they can interchange guys without too much fuss. So like you'll see there was a lot of talk at the weekend about the goalkeepers coming out for Monaghan and for Tyrone and the effect that was having on the defensive systems and why are they free, etc. But I just think Limerick can transition a marker. So like a guy can go on Jimmy Burns and he can transfer that marker over to Will O'Donoghue without too much fuss and without too much what would you call it, structural ramifications, if you get me. It doesn't do any effect to the team. That's just down to their training and they're so well drilled.
James, how much would Waterford learn from watching back the first half of that Munster final and what Tipp did to Limerick and what Tipp exposed in the Limerick defence? Like, do you think they found something that other teams, a bit of a template, or was it that just Limerick were so slow out of the blocks and that's, listen, for a team of their quality, just not going to happen again?
Yeah, I think two things happened there. I think one, a big thing, I know I'm not trying to be negative, but they didn't start Aaron Gillane, and he's like Aaron Gillane is, I'm not going to say he's probably one of the top corner forwards in the country, but he's a great outball. So he does the same job that Dessie Hutchinson does for Waterford. Like you control into the corner there and he'll gather for you high, low, and he'll hold up the ball and say, at least he'll get a shot off, And I say when Limerick didn't have Aaron Gillane and they weren't getting, I suppose, the rewards they have for the amount of balls against the corners. And that was no reflection on Graham McCahey as such. That was just, I suppose, the type of two different players, two stark contrasts in their style. But Tipperary then were so efficient, again, I keep using that word efficient, where every ball they struck went to hand. It was very, very surprising because you normally see teams make errors, a few errors, but Tipp, everything stuck. So everything went to hand, all the stick passing was good, hookouts were perfect. And they just created a small bit of pandemonium up in the forwards, on their forward line, where they got a lot of long deliveries. Limerick were slow on the breaks, and then Tipp just got a bit of luck with a couple of goals. Is that a game plan as such? I think for a period, yeah, to try it for a few minutes and see how it goes. But if Limerick are dominating breaks and that type of ball, stop. Just kind of rethink your process again. What Tipp also did was they created an element of confusion through Jason Ford, Noel McGrath, that kind of Dan McCormack a bit, let's say, where they were interchanging amongst themselves in midfield and the half forward line, and it caused a small bit of, I suppose, unrest for Limerick in the first half, and that got firmly fixed in the second half. So that was going back to my earlier point, whereby if Waterford try that, I think Limerick have seen it, they'll be able to counteract it a bit better. And I think if Waterford, a big thing for Waterford to get ahead, they need to do three things. I think if they get ahead, they need to be extremely efficient. So you remember the Tipperary game, whereby there was a whole plethora of shots that went wide for Tipp in the first half. That lead they had in the first half could have been 6-7 more when you consider all the shots they had. So if you get shots in open space against Limerick, you're going to have to take them. And you're going to have to be operating an efficiency rate of 85%. So like 8-9 points out of 10 shots. You just have to against Limerick because that's the type of team we're facing. The ball use has to be perfect. You can't allow any stray balls. You can't allow any turnovers. We see the Garrett Hegarty and Aaron Gillane turnover against Tipp resulted in the Seamus Flanagan goal. And you need to, I suppose, really not concede goals. So you can't allow any goal to win against Limerick, because if you get a lead in them whatsoever, a goal to Limerick, especially when it comes from one of their big players, if it comes from a Flanagan, a Lynch or a Hayes, it's nearly worth 2 goals to them and their crowd, and keep their crowd down as best you can. And look, the big thing for Waterford is stay in the fight. I know they're going to be out 4 weeks in a row. It's going to be extremely difficult for them on the energy side of things. But again, they've surprised me against Galway. They've surprised me against Tipperary in the sense that I kept waiting for Waterford for their legs to die. When you consider that it was the 3rd week in a row last week, Tipp were coming last week, and I just kept waiting for the Waterford fitness levels to, I suppose, suffer. Like as you would imagine, it would suffer over the course of 3 high intense games, but it didn't. It didn't, and that's the big thing for me now is can Waterford stay in the fight for the full 80 minutes? Over the course of 2 halves, because Limerick, Limerick are going to do it. You saw it against Tipperary in the very, very hot weather. They didn't die an ounce. So Limerick are going to come with energy, and just can Waterford stay in the fight.
I presume you start Aaron Gillane this weekend?
Oh, without question. Yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah. 100%. You put him in there. He's your best forward. He's your best inside forward, I should say. And like he's He's your free taker. He's an extremely efficient free taker. So, like, when you go to club games, if you have a good goalie and a free taker, you're halfway there. You go to inter-county games, if you have a good goalie, a kind of a good structure and a good free taker, you're halfway there. So, like, I don't see Aaron Gillane. I don't see a situation or a world where Aaron Gillane doesn't start the weekend. I think, not that they have much to learn, but I think the Limerick management have learned that they have to start Aaron Gillane.
Yeah, it was a strange experiment maybe to actually try and find that out. Like just on the Waterford side of things, there's going to be like an interesting discussion in the off season, regardless of what happens with Waterford this year, but especially if they lose, say, this weekend, about Liam Cahill and about the possibility of there being a vacancy in Tipperary. How do you see that playing out over the course of the next while? Do you think he could potentially be Tipp manager this time next year? Yeah,
I think there's every potential in it. I know when I spoke about Galway after their defeat to Waterford about a couple of retirements, I would probably expect 1 or 2 retirements in Tipperary as well. I do think they need an injection of youth because their average age of their team is 28, 29, and they've been on the road an awful long time. And they owe Tipp nothing, but I think if you're going to get an injection of youth, you're going to start a full rebuilding structure as such. And is Liam Sheedy going to do that? And I could be completely wrong here, guys, but I just don't see him doing it. I don't see him taking on the mantle of a rebuild. And I think when you look at what Liam Cahill did with Waterford, and there was a bit of controversy, to be honest, when there was, I think in Noel Connors and Mara Shannon, when he effectively released them, when he took over the panel without even seeing them, and people were going, what's he doing? These are 2 Waterford's best guys. But he's rebuilt the Waterford team, and he has them as serious contenders, And I think Tipp historically will nominate from within. So if Sheedy does go, I can't see a situation whereby Liam Cahill's not manager for Tipp next year. Only if Sheedy goes. I don't think there's never going to be a situation where Tipperary are going to ask Liam Sheedy to step aside. It's not going to happen. It'll be on his own terms. He deserves that. He's delivered success for them in minors and seniors. So that's if he wants to step away or wants to keep the job, I think he'll be keeping it. Until such time as that happens, or doesn't happen, should I say, then Liam Cahill is the man for it. Because Tipperary, they nominate from within. So if it is going to be Liam Sheedy stepping aside, Liam Cahill, I think, is definitely your manager. Definitely. And I think he was, if memory serves me correctly, he was the guy touted for the job because he had such success with Tipperary under 21 prior to Sheedy coming on board. So I think if he were a betting man, he could be saying Liam Cahill for manager next year. But
you get the sense here that Liam Sheedy, if he's going to sign up for next year, he's kind of signing up for a few years because next year is when the rebuild begins.
Yeah, I think, and because something is, I said it also about Galway, like it's strikingly similar situations whereby, if you're the next manager, nearly has to be invested, for the next, I'm going to have to say 2 years, minimum 2 years, and at least to try and kind of, I suppose, blend in an element of youth into each squad, because they're kind of on this. Both Galway and Tipp are kind of on the same trajectory in the sense that they've had, great talisman, and now they just need a bit of youth. Again, if Sheedy takes on that, he's going to have to try and sign up to the contract for 2 or 3 months, or 2 or 3 years, And Liam Cahill, you can see him on the sidelines, like he's got a massive amount of energy. You really think he wants to tug out himself, and just maybe that's something that Tipperary needs. They just need an injection of energy. Now Sheedy is very energetic himself, but he has his soldiers, and I think. A couple of those soldiers step aside, he might step aside himself.
Did you think over the course of this season that those soldiers had enough backup to allow them to actually become impact players? Because I guess that could have been maybe the defence of Liam Sheedy this year, that maybe he didn't fully trust some of the younger players because either they weren't proven or they're just not good enough yet.
Yeah. Well, from initial viewing, you'd say no, they didn't have enough backup. And the reason being is because if they had enough backup, that backup would be starting. Now that's the thing that comes to my head straight away. There's a reason Richie Hogan and Walter are on the bench for Kilkenny. Because the backup that they have, is good enough to carry the fight for 50 minutes for Kilkenny and then bring in the likes of Wally Walsh. We saw that against Wexford. I think in Tipperary's instance, I think that the Seamus Canlans, the Noel McGraths, Conor McGrath, they're still the best players on the Tipperary squad and still offering the most. Because if they weren't, they'd be somewhat pulled out, And it's one thing blending youth only when you think about into a team, but you need a fine balance of experience also, because if you're in the hunt immediately and you have a young team that are unproven, untested, it creates a small bit of instability in a team, whereby when you have the bit of experience and a bit of the old dog, let's say, on the pitch, you know that they've been through tests and they can get through hard times. So that's why it's always a fine line for managers when they try to blend in youth. Don't want to blend in too much youth, So I think Jake Morris was a step in the right direction for Tipp, but slowly it's baby steps down there, I think.
Yeah, it seems that way. Like the point you make there then brings us nicely onto Sunday's game, Kilkenny against Cork. It's 3:30 in Croke Park. That blend of youth and experience seems to have been something, I'm not sure was it deliberate or not, James, but it's something that Kilkenny have nailed at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And like the youth they have, like, I mentioned this before, they don't come across, some of them, as the most beautiful, stylish hurlers, let's say, who would fit the Kilkenny mold. But by God, they're effective. I mean, they're so effective. Their backs, like, they're going to meet a Cork team now who are essentially, let's call it flying high a bit. There's a lot of positivity down in Cork from a hurling perspective, where they're challenging minors. They've won 20s. They're another 20 final. They're going fierce well as senior, and so there's a bit of a train coming from Cork, let's say. And we know they're going to be seriously effective in the next couple of years when those 20s transfer up to seniors. But right now, Cork, they're riding the crest of a wave, and the worst team that can beat is Kilkenny, who are brilliant at, I suppose, mixing hurling and mixing the fight, putting the dog into the fight, you know what I mean? Or having the fight in the dog, should I say. And I think it's the right matchup. I think Kilkenny are quietly confident, if I'm honest. I think they prefer to have gotten Cork as opposed to Waterford. The Cork play a more traditional style, I say, but they play kind of a similar to what Waterford have adopted in a running game. And, Kilkenny have had to adopt that themselves over the course of the last couple of years to try and keep up with the pack. They would have always been an orthodox 15 team, Kilkenny. You'd never see sweepers or flipping three men midfield lines. They'd always gone 15 on 15 and kind of had a beat us if you can attitude, which was sufficient when they had greats, a whole host of great forwards, midfielders and backs. But whereas right now they probably have to adopt a new style to overcome certain systems they face, So I'm very interested to see how Cork will respond, because if you remember the Dublin game at the weekend, there was 10 minutes in the very last 10 minutes that Dublin, they were coming and they were narrowing the gap, and they got it down to 4, and just the Cork legs started to waver, and there was a small bit of panic. So when Kilkenny come at you for 80 minutes, I'm interested to see how Cork are going to respond. And again, that blend of youth in Kilkenny and that blend of experience coming off the bench, so they're going to be in the game for 80 minutes. Walter Walsh is going to come on if he doesn't start and make an impact. So it's how Cork are going to overcome that and keep the pace of Kilkenny for the whole duration.
Do you think that'll be part of Brian Cody's game plan then, having watched that performance against Dublin, that they, as you say, like, their work rate was massive, Cork, for the first hour, and then there was a dip. They just couldn't keep it going. That actually Brian Cody, knowing that it's impossible for them to improve on that really in the space of a week, he can say, you know what, my bench, I'll unload it, and that is the game plan. That'll be the winning of the game. We're happy to be level with 10 minutes to go because we know we have that strength and depth.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is. I think he'd be looking at the Cork team and say, right, how do we get them out of their comfort zone a small bit? What do Cork do really well, and how are we going to upset them? So, like, when you see Cork lads in a load of space and they're coming down the wing and popping over a ball, next thing you hear the rebels chat. That's what you hear out of the crowd, and it's because Cork are flying high, they're popping balls over lads' heads, and they're running around like marcheers. That's not going to happen with Kilkenny. What's going to happen is Cork are going to be hitting them out, and how are they going to respond? So he's going to make it as much of a dogfight and an absolute war for the course of 50, 60 minutes, and then unload what he has on the bench and see can Cork handle it. And that's the big question for me coming out of this weekend, or going into this weekend, should I say, can Cork handle that over the course of 75 minutes? Can they stay with Kilkenny's fight? Because of all the teams in the country, probably bar Limerick, Kilkenny have the best fight, the best internal fight, if you know what I mean, whereby there's never say die attitude, and they just keep on going and going and going. So I think would it be a tactic per se? I don't think it's a tactic. I think it's actually ingrained in Kilkenny, whereby they just go after you, from the off, and they never stop. So I think they're going to try and exploit that at Cork's expense. And it'll be interesting to see how Kilkenny will, react to Coleman coming forward, Tim O'Mahony coming forward, who'll track them and who'll hit them, and how will they manage, the likes of Flynn, who's been a really good addition to the Cork squad, and Horgan, because Horgan's going to get you your 10 points from frees anyway, but can you limit him from play entirely? And can you limit Seamus Harnedy from puck out? So all those things, I'd say, that Kilkenny would look at them and say, right, we're going to take them away from Cork.
Punching Cork in the mouth is something that Kilkenny did a couple of years ago when they played that game in the sun. I think it was in 2019, when I guess the preview kind of felt a little bit similar, James, when I don't know, there was this sense that Cork maybe might be able to get one over them, and it just didn't happen. So over the last 2 years then, have we seen Cork develop, I don't know, is it an edge? Is that what they require, or an ability to be able to withstand that punch in the mouth?
Yeah, I think like firstly, Kilkenny, like Cork haven't beaten Kilkenny in the semi-final in over 45 years, like more. You know what I mean? Kilkenny have only lost 5 the last 26 semi-finals. So Kilkenny aren't used to losing semi-finals. Whereas Cork haven't won Ireland since 2005. And like they've lost a couple of semis since. The last time they were in Croke Park was against Limerick in a semi-final, whereby they acquitted themselves really well and went to extra time. And probably could have only for a Nicky Quaid wonder save could have picked the game, you know. But they're a different team from them. Like I know it's 18 doesn't seem that long ago at all, but in terms of team structure and team rebuild, Cork have a completely different, I suppose, first 15 or squad, if you like, from 18 to where they are now. And I just think that the youth that have come in, a good lot of youth, with the blend of experience that, as I touched on before, has been a really good mix. Can they take the punch in the mouth? I'm going to have to say at the minute, it remains to be seen. Like I'm going to say they might not, you know what I mean? Because I think sometimes you have to lose one to win one. You know what I mean? I know that wasn't the case in Limerick's case, but I think Cork are going to have to will grow massively this year. Their game plan is relatively new. Like it only seems like yesterday they played Limerick down in the league and got destroyed. Their game plan got destroyed, but they've stuck with it and they've developed it over the course of the last couple of months. And now I think that they're getting the fruits of their labour somewhat. But doing it in Croke Park against the Kilkenny team that's it's well seasoned with their history and their management is a different proposition. And I'm not shouting. I'm calling for Kilkenny on the weekend. I think they're going to do it against Cork, and I just think that Cork will learn a lot from this year, and that what you'll see is next year will be a huge stepping stone again in the right direction for them.
The thing is, Cork probably do have an ability, James, to maybe blow a team out of the water. Maybe we haven't seen evidence of that just yet, but their goal scoring prowess is something that you point to and say, right, that's something that could do a lot of damage to a team.
Yeah, like they've got great pace, and when you consider their corner forward, their Coughlin inside, like as soon as he gets the ball, you can feel the excitement from the Cork crowd that they know he's got pace, and they're just kind of they're edging him on to go for the black spot. And like generally when he goes to the black spot, like something happens. Either he gets the goal, or like you see in this player, or he gets fouled. And he draws something over it. And like when you have a guy with such pace who can secure the ball, who can take on a defence, can make something happen. Again, it creates energy and adrenaline for the team. It creates energy and something to shout about for the crowd. And like that now, they've got the most amount of goals over the course of the Championship League out of anyone. So that was always a thing. That was a chink in Cork's armour over the last couple of years. But they didn't have a Jack Coughlin in the last couple of years. He was too young, effectively, last year to make a real impact. And here he is now, one of their main go-to guys. And him and the likes of deep-lying runners from Flynn, Meade, Kingston, O'Mahony, those guys coming through are creating a bit of havoc for goals. I think what you'll see is you'll see a packed-out defence against Kilkenny, whereby they're not going to allow deep runners, or they're going to, I suppose, give Jack Coughlin some of their undivided attention, if you put it that way, and try to stop the goals. Because if you stop goals against Cork, I think you go a good way of taking them down, And like again, as I always say, goals breed energy. Energy breeds, success for a team. So stop the goals for Cork, and you go a long way to beat them.
What was the most extraordinary example of undivided attention you and your teammates would have felt against the Brian Cody team?
Ooh, against or for? What we've given or what we received?
What you received.
What we received? Well, I off the ball or on the ball. Let me see now.
Feel free to give any instances of times you inflicted it on them as well.
I think like you'd have always been trying to look at them. You have to understand, Kilkenny were so strong going back years ago, that like you could try something. It was trial and error every day. You maybe got 1 or 2 opportunities to play them every year, and every day felt like a trial and error. Right, we'll try this today. Okay, that didn't work. Now we'll try this today. Okay, that didn't work. And part of that then was try to rough them up as such shows. Sometimes that didn't work. They were so strong, so physical. You could try to take them on. There was probably a semi-final or quarter-final against them in 0-7, whereby we had them in Croke Park, and we went toe-to-toe them, and there was a bit of a tension given to their half-back line with Tommy and with JJ. I think Iritanian was marking Tommy that day and gave him a bit of a couple of hugs and kisses, to put it that way to you. And like Galway were well within the fight, but then Eddie Brennan popped up the devil with 2 goals to sink us. Like, so you could do that. You could fight them for 95% of your time, and then the last 5% they'd catch you. And that was just them at the time. And look, you had to match them in hurling. That was the only way you could beat them when they were going well. Try and match them in hurling and physicality. Whereas I think now they've got a different type of mix. They've got a different blend. They're not as well, I suppose they're not as feared, if you want to use that word, as they were in the past. So again, I've no particular instance that comes to head. I get off the line now and sure, like I think it's 2 or 3. I'll come back to that one.
It does tie in with what you're saying about, can Cork take a punch? Like, you knew with that great Kilkenny side, if you could somehow go toe-to-toe with them, that you could take a punch. Now, there was very few that actually could, but like, I'm sure Cork players, if they were watching here, or Cork supporters, is thinking, well, this is, as you said, a relatively new side who are progressing, that maybe haven't had the opportunities yet to take that punch and show that they can take it. Like, a game like this can change everything, actually. If they can stand up to Kilkenny, we look at this Cork side in a completely different way. When you do think back to dressing rooms you were in, like, is there a common feature of a team that can take it and a team that can't? A team that can step up physically when it matters and a team that can't?
Yeah, I think when things go well for a team, it's very easy to look good, and it's very easy to have the energy to keep going well. And it's just when things start to go a bit awry and the wheels are coming off a small bit, like, can you stay? Again, I use the word for Waterford against Limerick. Can you stay in the fight? So if Waterford have a good, or Cork, have a good start, and next thing they get a lead, and they're beginning to get clawed back to Kilkenny, the next thing they get a sucker punch of a goal against them, and if Kilkenny begin to get a roll of a couple of scores, can Cork stop that and then come back with their own fight? If they do that within the game, so if they get ran against and they're going down a couple of points and they can stop the rot and then turn around and run back at Kilkenny and throw a few of their own scores or get a goal, you know what I mean? Then Cork are going to stay in the fight. It's when they're coming down the stretch in the second half and the game is in the melting pot, a bit like Kilkenny and Wexford in the Leinster Championship, and Kilkenny are beginning to turn up the heat a small bit and actually just finish it off entirely. Can Cork do the reverse and keep in the fight and make it a dogfight for 80 minutes against Kilkenny? That's when you know then. If that happens, you know then that this Cork team is around to stay. If that doesn't happen, you'll have to maybe, I won't say go back to the drawing board, but at least you'll be questioning their impact in this year's championship. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, so it's when Cork get punched. Can they punch back, or are they going to lie down and keep taking the punches? Do you know what I mean?
Is that a whole team effort, or actually is that where one or two real leaders can step up and actually drag everyone else through?
I think it's a decision before you even go out. I think you often hear this word work rate. Like I heard a coach before. I was on the sideline listening to a coach, and he said the work rate was a skill. Like, and I never heard such BS. Like, work rate is not a skill. Like, work rate is for me is a decision. You know what I mean? You decide you're either going to go after them or you're not. And it's easy to go after them when things are going well for you, but when things aren't going well for you, can you keep the work rate going? So if you're 19 or 20 on that team, if you're looking for someone else to do the job for you, you shouldn't be there in the first place. You know what I mean? So I think, of course, let's say people will look at a couple of the big players and they look at Harnedy and they look at Hogan and go, right, what are you going to do for us now to get us out of this jam? And they will have to give their fair share. But Patrick Collins is going to have to be deadly in the goals and hit all his puck outs. Downey fullback is going to have to marshal that square after no tomorrow. Jim O'Mahony's going to have to keep doing what he's doing for 75 minutes, keep running forward and making hay against Kilkenny. All those things attribute to a team who can, I suppose, challenge for honours. And like, if things go bad for Cork for a period, for a course of a few minutes, it's up to them all. It's up to the management. And when people come off the bench, the subs, I'd always say to our subs that, like, you don't just come on to fill the gap or just to replace the guy who's tired. You're coming on to make a severe impact on the opposition. So if that's taking a guy for a run or hitting him with a shoulder or put him down on his back for a couple of seconds, that's what needs to be done. Do you know what I mean? So it's a case that the whole 30-man panel and the whole management and everyone is rolling together and say, that's it, enough now, and just get after them. Put in the fight for 80 minutes, regardless of what happens. That's the true test of a good team.
You say that Kilkenny perhaps aren't as feared as they once were, but do Limerick fear this Kilkenny team more than anyone else in the remaining three teams that they could play?
Do Limerick fear them, is it?
Yeah.
I would say Limerick don't fear Cork at all. I would say Limerick will be, slightly concerned with Waterford, but they beat them in last year's final by 11 points, which was only 8 months ago. So would they fear Waterford? I'm going to have to say no. The last time we played Kilkenny really effectively in a heated battle was 19 semi-final, was it? It was the 19 semi-final. So, and they got beaten. And they got beaten by a game plan. And they got outworked. So I would say, to answer your question on fear, no. Concern, yes. Slight concern. That I think they've done it just before. And like, momentum is one thing. We talk about momentum over the course of a season, but also you have to think against an opposition. Like if you've beaten them a couple of years previous, you still have momentum against them. You still have it. Yeah, we've beaten these guys, and the key thing is you've ticked the box and we can do it. If you haven't done it, that's a different question entirely. Then you're asking, is our system going to work? Are our players good enough, etc. But when you have done it, you can do it. And I'd be very interested to see that, especially in a final. Final is different to a semi-final. Semi-final is just a course. It's just a case of just trying to get through it and get to the final. The final, anything can happen. And we've seen, in years previous with teams who were supposed to win semi-finals or supposed to win finals, they didn't. So that'll be an intriguing matchup if it does turn out that way.
Can I throw one at you, James, before you go?
Throw away.
Davy Fitz to Galway?
Davy Fitz to Galway.
What do you think of Shane O'Neill if he doesn't come back?
No.
Not a runner?
Not a runner for us. I think what Galway need now is say if Shane O'Neill does decide, and again I think he deserves respect, Shane. I think every manager does to decide his own future to a certain extent. I think if he does step aside, I think Galway will have to nominate from within. I think that's what's needed before. I think we'll have to look at getting someone who has worked with the youth or worked in the club structure for a period and see can we try and bring in some of the young guys and try build a new team as such for over the next few months. And I don't think Fitzy's the man for that. I think he'll come in and look for an immediate injection and try to cure something with the team he has there. You know what I mean? Because again, it's a bit like we said about the Liam Sheedy and Tipperary, whoever comes in is going to have to be signed up for 2 to 3 years to do a full rebuild, and will have to be nominated from within to get a full grasp of who you have, both from from a club structure and from players. Because like everyone looks at county players, but you could be missing someone inside. You could be missing a guy that's going well for his club because he hasn't been on a minor team or hasn't been on a 20 team. So I just think it's going to be someone from within, guys.
James, enjoy the weekend's hurling. Great chatting to you.
Okay, folks. Thanks.